when you go into any scene, you want to have the ability to size that scene up. The size up is essentially taking notice of everything that's on the scene. Now, I've been doing it for a long time, so my brain, no matter where I go, automatically sizes that up. I'll go in a restaurant and I'll size the scene up. I'll come in here and size it up. Walk down the hall. Scene size up is very important. That's what's going to keep you healthy once you get out, even in your clinical, in college. When you guys start going to college next year, you size things up. It's essentially what I call to have a good situational awareness. You be aware of your surroundings. It's very important. I've noticed this over the past few years that teenagers, they don't seem to have a good situational awareness. I think it comes from living in the areas that we live in. We're not in South Dallas. If you lived in South Dallas, you probably have a better situational awareness because there's more people out there that want to hurt you than in Creek Crossing. All right? I mean, that's just the truth of it. When you go into a bad neighborhood somewhere, your little spidey senses come out a little bit more, right? You lock the doors, you stare down people, making sure that they're not going to hurt you, right? I take my gun out of my side door and put it on my seat. So, I mean, you know, everybody has different things they do, but everything is a size up. Very, very important that you develop that skill, just not in EMS, but in life. Like, I'm pretty good at it. A lot of people say, oh, it's just observation, and it is. But after you do it for a certain length of time, then you get where it's automatic. You know? So when you start looking at stuff and you sort of just go across the room, you know, and you look and you say, well, okay, laundry's on her phone, you know, somebody's asleep back there, mom's boy's trying to go to sleep, he's just fighting it off, you know. So you look and you notice these things, and she's on her phone too, texting somebody. So you just want to pick these observations up as you go along, and it sort of applies over into patient care because you look at these things in the same way. And this chapter here sort of breaks it down for us. So what we do in the size up is, one, always your safety first. Make sure that the scene is safe. You want, when you go in, you take precautions. You start looking at what's called the mechanism of injury or the nature of illness. That's if you're on a car wreck, you look and see how bad the car's wrecked, what type of car wreck it is. You're going into a chest pain call, a gunshot, a stabbing, whatever it is. You sort of start looking at that, and you're making decisions based on this. We're not even at patient contact. Sizing up the scene is not when you get to the patient. It's all the things that happen when you leave the station to the time that you come in contact with the patient. So you determine the number of patients. Hey, you know, this is much different than last year. Last year, even in our assessments, we stuck to one patient, right? This time we don't have multiple patients. So you don't have to do what's called triage, and you don't have to determine the number of patients. And do I need any additional resources? Am I going to need ALS support, advanced life support? Am I going to need rescue, fire, police? What additional resources am I going to need as I go to the scene? With my partner, we start sizing things up when we get the call. You know, it comes out, motor vehicle wreck, collision, Interstate 30. Well, right away we know highway speeds, right? So they had a wreck going 75, 80 miles per hour perhaps. So you gain a lot of information just from that. And then as you listen to the dispatch, one car rollover. So now we know it's a higher mechanism because the car is rolling over. So the more information that we get, the more size up we have, and we haven't even made it to the scene yet. We're thinking of these things as we go to the scene. So, when you get within sight of the scene, you should sort of start looking at other things. So you're pulling up, you and your partner, and in this class, it's a BLS ambulance. That's very important to remember, that it's you as an EMT and your partner as an EMT. All BLS, basic life support. So when you look up and you're approaching the scene, you have this sort of wide vision, and you're just sort of looking at everything in the scene. This particular picture here, they ran into the telephone pole. So when you're looking at that and you're coming up on that scene, one thing that you would look for is other things, smoke, other things, power lines. Is this a power pole that they knocked down? Are there power lines down? Is there smoke or steam coming from the vehicle? But if we just look at this picture here, the proper size up with that, I would be pulling up on that scene, and I would tell the dispatcher, I would give them a verbal size up because other units responding in, I would tell them, one car vehicle into the telephone pole, 2 patients, one patient appears to be unconscious. And so that gives them a size up on what to do as a dispatch and everybody else listening. So maybe my coworkers are listening to that, and I say 2 patients, 1 patient appears to be unconscious, then they know that they need to get up and get their boots on, because they're probably going to get a call for a second unit, right? Because an ambulance can only handle 2 patients, but only 1 critical patient. So when you know that information, that you can handle 2 patients, but only 1 critical patient, when you look here, I don't know how well you can see the guy on the driver, but see how his head is up against the steering wheel? So he appears to be unconscious. An unconscious person that's involved in trauma is a big thing. So I'm sizing this up, thinking, I've got 1 patient probably in critical condition. The other size up, that from looking at this picture here, is I don't need rescue. There's no extrication involved in this call. Why is that? Exactly, the doors are open. So see, just from the picture you get that much. This is a fairly minor wreck. This is not a major wreck. You're getting into different things. I've got better pictures I'll show you later when we get into trauma, what's a bad looking wreck and what's a minor wreck. But this is pretty minor. I would call that minor to moderate damage. So they need to know this. The EMS supervisor needs to know this. Rescue fire needs to know it. So there's a lot of things from just here that they need to know as well. The other thing is that it's off the road. This vehicle is not blocking traffic. It's off the road. So just from one picture, you can gain a lot of information for that size up. Also, be aware of people and bystanders walking around. You get a car wreck here, and then all of a sudden you got a bunch of bystanders. What don't you know? That's true. They could be dangerous. They could be the ones that ran the car off the road, or any of you guys patients. So I have a car wreck here, and I have a bunch of people standing over here. I'm looking at the car going, were any of you guys in the car? If not, then get out of the way. Because I'm looking at it going, thinking that maybe you're a patient, maybe you were inside the car, and someone's over there helping you. So when bystanders, people walking around, because they always rubberneck, and they're standing around and watch. I've had people try to take photographs of a fatality scene before. People on the highway passing by, it was fatality. They wanted to take pictures. Really? Why don't you go take a picture of bluebonnets or something. But and then also you've got to watch out for other people that's on the scene that's trying to give you information. So when we do get on rescue scenes or these different type of pre-hospital environment, there's a lot of information, a lot of people there that you need to be aware of and communicate with. There's a danger zone that we'll talk about more in hazmat. This we won't really bring it up too much now, but if you have a hazardous material that's spilt on the road, you'd set up what's called a danger zone. And in that danger zone, only hazmat, hazardous material trained people would go in that zone. So we'll talk about that later, but that is a different area that you would have to set up as well. And then, sort of like you said, there's people on the scene. Are there people fighting? You know, you have people yelling and cussing. Is that a deal? Because all of a sudden now you're thinking, man, this could be violent. Weapons, the big thing. Maybe you got there, the police cleared you in, and all of a sudden people start pulling weapons. Now the scene's unsafe, and you're trying to get out of there, right? I've been into and this happens not just on violent things. I went to a guy's house. I forget what was wrong with them. Old man, you know, medical emergency, something like that. He was sitting in his chair in his living room. We knocked the door. Nice guy invited us in, and I took about a step in the house, and I noticed sitting to his side was probably the largest gun I've ever seen. It was a handgun. I don't see how this old man could even pick it up to shoot it, but it was a huge handgun. And so I stopped, and I looked at him, and I'm like, we got a problem. You got a gun. And so we're backing out of the house, and he goes, no, that's not for you. That's for intruders. And so I had to tell him, I said, can you get up? I asked him, can you get up? And if you can, then you need to move away from the gun. So he got up out of his chair and went to the other side, and we sort of blocked off where the gun was. You know, he was an old man. If he had ran for the gun, we just tripped him or something. But I wouldn't know, or my partner would know. We're not going in that house with the gun beside the old man, whether he's nice or not. It was unsafe. The other one cracks me up. We went in. It was some old lady. 60, 70-year-old lady having chest pain. We pull up, and there's police cars all around the place. And we go, it's 3 o'clock, 3 o'clock in the morning. We look at them, we're like, you guys are bored or what? He goes, no, we heard the call come out on the radio at this residence. The lady you're going to see is Miss Crack. And all of her children and her grandchildren are crack dealers. So when you go in there, you'll see what I mean. And sure enough, the old lady was sitting in the chair, and the people behind her and around, they looked like dope dealers. So and it definitely wasn't safe in that house. It was when we went in there because we had big people with guns in there with us. So we took Granny Crack out, took her to the hospital, and I said, y'all guys deal with this. I think these other guys are a police matter, right? And we got out of there. But just that, if we would have went in there by ourselves, we would have got into a situation. I've been in situations where I've been inside the house, taking care of a patient, and then outside the house, something takes place. So we can't make it back to the ambulance. There's a big fight outside. So we have to call the police from inside the house to have them come break up the fight that's outside so we can take our patient to the hospital. So there's all sorts of stuff that takes place that you have to realize, hey, that's not really a safe scene. This, especially alcohol and drugs, get a bunch of drunks together, it's going to be trouble. All right, so you got this is trouble for you in EMS. They lose all their mind, you know. So unusual silence. I've found this out when teaching high school. I go, you know, we're not doing anything. Go in my office, and all of a sudden it gets really quiet here. Something's up. You can tell, right? Something's going on when you get too quiet. You just don't get a certain group of people together, and it remains so deathly quiet. There's something going on. So it's always that unusual silence. It should be louder, but it's not. And then known violence. Sure, if it's a bad part of town. The other thing that you will look at is the nature of the call, mechanism of injury. We talked about that, and what caused the injury: a gunshot wound, a stabbing, an automobile accident, or was it a medical call of some sort that's causing that? This is when you look at this step process, and you look at your patient assessment skills test, it's this. It goes straight down this. These are things that you get points for when you do your patient assessment skill. I'll try to burn those off for you soon. So we look at this. We're looking at this wreck here for mechanism, all right? And when we come up on the wreck and you're walking up towards the car, you're anticipating what kind of injury that you're taking part, so that you know that you need additional resources. So this was a rollover, correct? It looked like this car had flipped on its side, broken the windshield. This is due to the rollover, I think, not someone hitting the windshield, but still quite a bit of damage to the car. So as you look at that, you go, what could have taken place here? What injuries am I looking at as far as the patient is concerned? Now, this is something you just don't acquire overnight. It takes some experience and time, but that's why we practice it. So we look at that, and then back to this one we've already talked about, right? What kind of injuries would you have there? I would say not too much, because this is not really a major wreck, but you could, if these guys were not seat belted in, right? He could have kissed that steering wheel, hit the glass is intact, right? So they didn't come in contact with this the windshield. You can see that this lady is seat belted in, correct? So all those little clues as you walk up towards, because these are things that you would eventually have to document. Passenger seat belted, driver unseat belted, no extrication involved, minor to moderate front end damage, airbag deployment. Did the airbag deploy? Didn't look like it, in this particular one. So no airbag deployment. All these things that, as far as documentation, things that you would have to remember and write down later. When you're looking at head-on collisions, quite a bit, just not here at this at the telephone pole, but head-on collisions with car and car. When we get into trauma, we'll look at a lot of different mechanisms and a lot of different accidents on the way that they happen. But a head-on collision is what's called a high mechanism of injury, especially at highway speed. So you're going down maybe a county road or something, and you hit left front to left front, or even down here on Cartwright, 45 miles per hour, left front to left front, there's a high potential of a fatality there. Because how fast, if both cars are going 45 miles an hour, at what speed did you come in contact with each other? 90 miles an hour. At 90 miles an hour, for that type of collision, left front to left front, you only have a 25% chance of survivability being the driver. Most all left front to left front collisions I've seen, there seems to be always one fatality in the car. So, one of the drivers. Here we look at this on the windshield. This is what's called a starred windshield. You can sort of see it right up in here. A lot of times if this was like a patient that hit this, you would see the blood and some skin and stuff up there. All right? But they come in contact with the windshield. High probability of a head injury when you start looking at that. So they went up and over and hit the windshield. Again, we'll go through a lot of these when we talk about trauma. Look at this. This truck rear-ended this other truck. See how this is pushed in? The white truck is pushed into the station wagon. That's called intrusion. And you measure it in feet. So this is probably 2 feet of intrusion that this vehicle came in this other vehicle. Anything more than a couple feet elevates the high mechanism of injury. So you get here, this guy has a sudden stop sort of injury, right? This person that's in here gets hit from the rear, maybe what's called a coup contre coup injury, where they go forward and they back, sort of like a whiplash type of injury here. So you start, when you come up on this one and you're trying to anticipate, hey, what's taking place there, and you're doing a size up, first thing you look at is this intrusion back through here. And then all the stuff in there. In the back, if it's loaded down, it adds more weight to it. Speed and mass, right? And then the rollover, when you start looking at the rollover, one thing you have to look at, did it go over, like from the wheels to the roof over, or did it, what's called an endo? Did it, like if this was the front of the car, did it start rolling like this instead of like this? Here is a very high mechanism of injury. It creates that kinetic energy inside the car, and if the patient's not strapped in, that's the importance of it's a rollover, in a vehicle rollover, that you stay strapped in. That's one of the big importance of a seat belt. It's that you stay in your seat inside the car. If not, you're like a ping pong ball inside here, right? I mean, you're being thrown all over the car. Then you have the possibility of being ejected or thrown out of the car through the glass, you know. Now, with an ejection, if the patient's ejected, again, they only have about a 20% chance of survivability. Their survivability goes way down. And that depends on what window they went out of. If there's an open window, or did they go through the glass? So there's a lot of potential here when you start looking at that. So these are the things that you size up and you look at, and it's after a certain point of time, it becomes second nature for you to do that. Like I'll drive past a wreck on the highway, look over at it, do a size up, and keep driving, you know. Just automatically in my head, I do that. So these are the things that you sort of get used to doing. And I think overall, for everything, it keeps you very healthy. When you look at a fall, you know, adult more than 20 feet, or a child 3 times their height, you see different things in the book and on test here, but essentially it's about 3 times their height, either adult or a child. I always go off with 3 times the height because I'm a bad judge of how high things are. So you look up and go, man, that's a long way up there. And if you're thinking that, then it's probably a high, severe fall or a high mechanism. The cool thing about children, small children, is that they're mostly cartilage. So if they do hit, they're going to bounce a little bit. They're not like me. I would fall and break. A child would fall and sort of bounce, and they wouldn't break as easy. So the height, the surface, they fall in concrete, fall in the grass, which right now is as hard as concrete, right? What did they hit? They hit their head. Did they hit something else coming down to slow their fall or to cause more damage? What did they fall off of? All this very important as far as when you start looking at different types of falls and different types of injury. The other one is it a low velocity type injury like a stabbing or a blunt force trauma? They get stabbed or hit with the bat. Where did it penetrate? What organs might be affected here? What weapons? So on a stabbing, like if I was to ram this sword through you, and I pull it out, and I'm like, I'm out of here. And, they always drop the knife for some reason, and then they get out. So when EMS gets there, they're fixing you up, that big piercing wound, and then someone would take the knife and go, wow, there's 8 inches of blood. The bloodline's at 8 inches. So I would come over here and go, oh wow, that could have went all the way through you. So on your left side, if that's where I stabbed you, I'm thinking, okay, could have got the spleen, could have got a bowel, right? That's about all that's on there, right? On the other side, the liver, get a kidney. What happened there when you start looking at that stabbing? So there's things to do the size up there that you start just running through your mind with. Was it a medium or high velocity, or was it a bullet? Did the bullet go through, or is it still in the patient? What kind of exit wound did it produce? Was it shotgun? How far away was the shotgun blast? Because across the room here, like say I'm going to pop one in Frank over there, and I got a shotgun, right? Well, if I've got just a regular shotgun shell, like birdshot or something, from me to Frank, it's not that big of a wound, right? Because he'll have all these BBs stuck in them. But that's pretty much about it. But if I'm here, if I'm a couple of feet from Frank with the shotgun, that's a problem, right? Because he's going to get a more concentrated blast. The BBs are not going to go out in sort of a cone shape. They're going to come out in like a pipe shape. So he's going to get all the blasts at once, correct? Same way with like a 9mm. The 9mm is a higher velocity round, so it's going to probably go through, unless it hits a big bone or something. So you're thinking, where did it go and where did it exit? Because a bullet can hit a leg and travel up and exit out of the shoulder, perhaps, or it can get stuck in the leg. So when you start doing all this size up things, what organ could it have hit? In cavitation, when we look at cavitation, we're looking at, I'll try not to draw too much, but you're looking at somebody's big old belly here, okay? The bullet comes in, and the bullet comes through. What happens is it makes this cone shape as it goes in, and it cavitates, meaning that it comes in and then it goes like this. Not the bullet, but the energy that the bullet is causing. The energy causes this cone shape effect. So just like in a blast injury, the bullet may go through the middle of my abdomen, but lacerate my liver because of all the energy that it's displacing through the cavitation. Does that make sense? So now you got to think, you just can't think, oh, he's got a through and through on the abdomen, because the liver could be affected because of the energy that's released from the bullet. Remember that whole thing? We can't destroy, energy's just displaced, we can't destroy it, right? Who was that? Newton? Was it Newton? Alright, then you get blunt force trauma like a bat or a car, and you just sort of look at different things of, hey, how is that taking place? You know, what injuries could that, what organs could that affect? And then on medical patients, you look at the nature of illness. We talked about this last year a little bit when we asked you guys to make a good first general impression. You remember that? So when you went up to the patient, you made a first general impression. You looked at them, oh, they look sick. You know, they don't look sick. So those are the type of things that you're making the impression of. Your first general impression here would be what? Huh? Anybody else? Huh?
She doesn't look sick.
No? What? Her wrist? What? She doesn't look sick? What else? I'm wondering where she got those shoes. Now the wrist, right? The obvious thing. You look at that. She's holding her wrist. Her wrist might be hurt. You can tell people in pain. Some of this you can get from the patient. Some of it bystanders, family. Other things you sort of look around the scene and you can pick up clues at the scene. Like a patient has diabetes, what will they have laying around? And needles, right? Either they're a junkie or they're a diabetic. So you're sort of picking that up. They're a clean junkie because there's a lot of needles laying around at least, right? Or they have diabetes. So different sources, different things that you can pick up. The number of patients is always important. On car wrecks, like we were saying, you can only handle so many patients at a time. So you need to know how many patients they are. And do you need any additional resources? Fire, high-angle rescue, hazmat. Do we have an oil spill? Do we have some sort of spill that we need to clean up? And so you get used to looking for these additional resources. Additional resources as well would be advanced life support. Is this patient having a heart attack and they need something that you can't give them? You know, air evac. Do they need a helicopter? All right. Any questions there? I mean, that was just sort of a huge thing when you sort of start looking at the scene. It's a picture. The way that I look at scene size up is if I took one of these puzzles that have 100 pieces together, right? And I throw it out on the table and I spread it all out on the table and I start sizing things up. You know, when you put together the puzzle, you put together the border first. So you look at find all the pieces with the edge on it, right? So I'll find all those pieces with the edge, and then I'll start trying to fit in other pieces that look like they fit in there. And pretty soon you come up with a picture. You start coming up with a picture, right? So that's sort of the size up thing. You're making the border, and you start coming up with what the picture would look like. The other, as you make patient contact, then you start putting the other pieces together, and the picture gets much clearer after that.